part one of a two-part mega preview with Javier Reyes of Locked On Padres, talking about struggling stars on both of our teams, the state of the NL West, and so much more on today's Locked On Diamondbacks, Locked On Padres crossover.
You are Locked On Diamondbacks, your daily Arizona Diamondbacks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked On Diamondbacks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Listen to who? The always charismatic host of this podcast, Miller Thomas. I'm a multimedia journalist and I'm a graphic designer, so please go check out my website, MillerThomas24.myportfolio.com to see all of my latest work. Today's episode is brought to you by Monopoly Go. We got to talk more about Monopoly Go. This fast-paced game lets you team up with your friends for tournaments to unlock awesome prizes like unique stickers for trading, cool playing pieces, and hilarious emojis for taunting your friends. So download Monopoly Go, now free on Google Play or on the Apple App Store. On today's Locked On Diamondbacks podcast, we got a crossover with Locked On Padres host Javier Reyes to bring you a mega preview podcast before the D-backs Padres series this weekend. We'll talk about every angle you could think of. This is only part one. You will hear part two of the podcast some point today. I'm going to be dropping part two around the same time I drop part one. So be on the lookout in your Locked On Diamondbacks feed. And speaking of, thank you for making Locked On Diamondbacks your first listen every day. I would not be able to do this podcast without you, my loyal listeners, sharing, subscribing, reviewing, doing all that so I could do this podcast for you. Thank you. It's free and available on all platforms, so please continue to tell your friends. And one of those platforms is YouTube, so please hit subscribe to Locked On Diamondbacks on YouTube. But now let's get into that conversation with Javier Reyes of Locked On Padres. Now we are joined by the esteemed podcast host of the Locked On Padres podcast, Javier Reyes. As always, I got to ask, how you doing today, sir?
I'm doing fantastic, sir. Living, laughing, just living my absolute fullest. Living and loving. Yeah. I mean, that's all you can do, right? And I think that it's weird because the Padres have not necessarily earned that sort of mentality, that sort of feeling, that sort of mood for me. But nonetheless, I still try to keep it going. I'm all, dapped up. I've got the 1969 Padres hoodie that I got for Christmas. I've got the hat. I'm feeling good, man. And I'm really excited for this weekend series.
Yeah, it's a big series for both of our teams because we're basically neck and neck in the standings right now. Both of our teams are just kind of floundering, trying to find their footing. And we're going to get into that D-backs versus Padres series. But I just want to ask you more general talk. How are you feeling about the start of the baseball season? How are you feeling about the state of the National League right now? There's a lot of, you look at like the National League wild card race, like it's pretty weird. Like even though our two teams are not doing good, there's still like 2 games back of a wild card spot. I think the Mets have like the 3rd wild card spot right now. Just a lot of weird stuff in the National League. What are your early season thoughts from what you've seen from baseball so far?
Yeah, I mean, there's been a bunch. I think that while there has been, I don't think it's been quite as dreadful as last year. And while it is obviously too early to say, the teams that have been a little bit underwhelming this year, it's not like gigantically disappointing, or at least not gigantically like we didn't see it coming. And last year had a lot of that, where it was like every interesting team was bad. You had, except for the Rangers, right? Where you had the Padres were bad. And the D-backs, this isn't an insult, they got more interesting as the season went along. And then we were like, okay, this is why we like them. But heading into the year, we were like, we don't know these guys. Mariners were another one. Guardians were another one. The Mets were another one. The Yankees, I think I already said, like just a lot of disappointing teams last year. And this year, I don't think we've had too much of that. It feels like we've just had really good players like stepping up, and that's been fun to watch. The sad thing has been the injuries, and while that's not exclusive to this year, the pitching epidemic I think has been not exclusive to this year, has been more of a storyline this year, with everyone who has velocity and throws hard seems to be getting Tommy John or whatever, right? So that's been unfortunate. So I guess that's just life, man. You take a step forward, you have one backwards, you know what I mean? Like it's just, or 2 steps forward, 1 backwards. So that's very unfortunate, but nonetheless, I have been enjoying it. I love my zombie runner on second. I don't care what anybody says.
Okay.
I've liked the rules. I think it's still weird for me as someone who grew up watching baseball so much to see all the, just the games go so short. I don't think it's a bad thing. It's just weird. I remember being like, yep, time to sit back, open up a book maybe, and watch some baseball for 3.5 hours. And instead now it's like I look up and we're in the 7th inning stretch. And I think that it is good for growing the game in a lot of ways. Just something to get used to. But I've been talking a lot. How have you felt about the early season so far?
No, I mean, I absolutely love the new rule changes. We've talked about ad nauseum on this podcast. I mean, the shorter games, I think, they're just a flow to these games now that I think are absolutely beautiful. And I think for the most part, my biggest thoughts from this season, I don't know, there feels like there's been like a lack of offense this year. And even with that pitching epidemic, you would think maybe there's a little bit an uptick on the offensive numbers, but so far to start the season, I think runs are like slightly down. Averages are slightly down across the board. People are wondering, did the baseball get nerfed again? I don't think that's the case. I think we've just seen some really weird, slow starts from the stars across the league, like the Corbin Carrolls of the world. And we'll talk about your team as well with some of the struggling stars. So I think it's mostly like some of the best players in the game. Not everyone is off to the hottest starts. You can look at the Paul Goldschmidts, and I don't think the Acuñas of the world are even off to the MVP stuff they had last year. So I think some of it is the parity we see right now in Major League Baseball. If you look at the standings outside like the division winners and like the top 2 teams, basically outside like the top 10 teams in Major League Baseball, there's a lot of parity right now. Royals have a wild card spot. Tigers have a wild card spot. New York Mets have a wild card spot. There's just a lot of parity right now in the state of Major League Baseball. And so let's dwindle it down a little bit more. Javi, how do you feel about the state of the NL West right now with the Dodgers in first place? And then just feels like, the Rockies are in last place as we all expected. But then that middle part, the part that we all debated on those round tables and everything, kind of coming into fruition where it's like, we don't really know who's the second, third, or fourth best team in the NL West.
Yeah, it's so funny that like the Padres have been so weird, and especially for fans who've been following the team, like they think it's like we're the worst. They're hilariously enough second in the division, which don't get me wrong, that doesn't matter when we're this early. Like it just doesn't if you're second or whatnot. I think it only matters the standings when you're like egregiously out of it. So like one impression, just I'll get back to NL West, but like the Houston Astros, that's a team that's 10-20. So I'm starting to be like, wait, maybe that actually they might be falling apart. But other than that, you're right. We haven't really got a lot. The Dodgers started off weird. The Padres, of course, took care of business against them as they often do. You know what I mean? I'm just gonna say, Jerks and Profar. You know what I mean, man. And for some reason, we're the only ones that can hit Yamamoto. This is like a real thing. He's given up like 5 combined runs to the Padres at each start or something like that. But in general, it's like the Dodgers are figuring it out now. I have no doubt that they will, at least regular season standing wise. We'll see what happens later. But yeah, man, it's been a lot of weird stuff. The Giants are very phenomenally weird. The Blake Snell thing hasn't worked out for them so far in the early going, although I think that there's a lot more complications to that. And then the D-backs, they've had some of their own weird things, but they've also had some injuries where they have Erod and Jordan Montgomery's only just coming back. Like they signed him late. So you have that. And then there's probably another major injury that I'm forgetting
just got put on the 60-day IL today. So
Merrill Kelly, really?
Yeah, Merrill Kelly. Yeah. So
I didn't even realish that. Jeez.
Yeah. He's gone to
that was who it was.
Break. Yeah.
I must have thought it said Joe Kelly in the notification alert or something.
I wish it was Joe Kelly. Man. I think we both wish that right there.
Yeah.
So, we don't want to wish injury on anyone actually, but I wish it was another Kelly instead of Merrill.
All right, let's not get fired now. But no, I'm kidding. I know what you mean. Like, it's just been like a lot of bad. The only consistent thing has been that the Rockies are terrible. That's the only thing, except for when they play the Padres and then the Padres blow a 9-4 lead. But nonetheless, that's what I've noticed so far. There's been like 2 disastrous teams with the Marlins and the Rockies. Yeah. Personally, I am not surprised at all about the Marlins, but even still, it's still a playoff team. So that's one, big thing that's fallen off. Cardinals have been struggling.
Yeah. Are the Marlins the biggest disappointment so far to start the year? I don't want to get too off topic with the National League, but they're very disappointing right now. I hated what they did.
I don't think so. I don't think they're disappointing because of what they did this offseason. I headed into the year being like negative run differential. They were obscenely clutch. They lost Jorge Soler. They get rid of their GM and coach manager, despite the fact that they made the playoffs for the first time since 2003. I'd love to find through baseball history how many teams have lost their manager and GM the year, like the offseason after they made the playoffs. I'd love to know that. But regardless, it's been a lot of fun, man. There's still been so much to watch, and I just think that we just don't have an idea of how this is all going to shake up. Because on the one hand, the Mets have been playing really great, but they're still just 16-15. We have to see how the wild card goes down. The Brewers are 19-11, but both you and I, and especially you, flex for a little bit. You ain't scared of no Brewers, and they're probably going to end up trading off at the deadline. So there's still so much left, man.
Yeah, a lot of baseball left. And of course, this weekend, we're going to have the D-backs versus Padres, which Javi and I will break down in some detail in segment number 2. And if you plan on betting on who's going to win this series between the D-backs and Padres, the place you need to go to place that low wager is, of course, FanDuel Sportsbook. It's winner take all time in the NBA and NHL, and FanDuel's giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. My favorite thing to do, though, is the same game parlay, and best believe I'm going to be riding something with the D-backs versus Padres this weekend. Give me Ketel Marte total, or not total, over on RBIs. Give me the over on total bases, and give me that D-backs money line. I'm going to do that parlay every single game of this series, and if it hits, I'm going to get a big payout in my pocket. And if you want a big payout in your pocket, visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make every playoff shot count. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. All right, game off. We got to pause here to talk about Monopoly Go. I know what you're saying. Flag on the play. You already talked about that. But there are just so much good stuff in this game. Monopoly Go, you can team up with your friends for time tournaments where you work together to build up each other's boards. The more you win together, the more awesome prizes you unlock. And there's so much to get. Unique stickers. You can trade with friends to complete albums for big prizes. Cool new playing pieces to travel the boards with. Hilarious emojis for taunting friends when you smash the buildings or heist their vaults. Plus, Monopoly Go feels new and exciting every day with constantly changing tournaments and challenges. A ton, including their own unique mini games like digging for treasure or a robot pachinko machine. Not sure if I said that correctly. And there's always new timed events that help you win big, like massive multipliers for everything you want to win or rent frenzy. So there's always something fun to discover in Monopoly Go. Get off the bench and go download it now, free on the Google Play or Apple App Store. Game on, Monopoly Go. Download it today. All right. Let's get back into the Locked On Diamondbacks, Locked On Padres crossover with host of the podcast, of course, Javier Reyes. Javi, game 1, D-backs versus Padres. We got Dylan Cease versus Slade Ciccone. Cease, of course, acquired this offseason by the San Diego Padres from that pitiful Chicago White Sox organization. Has Dylan Cease been everything you've expected so far?
Yeah. And while his last start against the Phillies when the Padres went through their really rough stretch wasn't great, it was still not bad. I mean, went 6 innings at the minimum. He still got some strikeouts. He has been the preeminent perfect. It has turned out so well, them losing Blake Snell, who I love, and then getting Dylan Cease, right? Everything. Now, don't get me wrong. The guy who's currently in New York is killing it, has completely re-energized the team, and they look like an entirely new vibe and organization. But they ostensibly from that trade got an asset that they used to then acquire Dylan Cease. So I think that the Padres, while it is an abject failure and a fireable offense, in my opinion, to have gotten into a position where you let Juan Soto leave, or you had to not let him leave, but you had to get rid of him for some money reasons, et cetera, et cetera. They did well off of it. And Dylan Cease is the example why. Like, Michael King has struggled for sure. Mm-hmm. You might get him this weekend. Congratulations if you do. But with Dylan Cease, man, He's just been electric, man. Yes, will he throw some pitches in the dirt sometimes? Sure. And will he give up some home runs? Absolutely. But the whole thing is the swings and the misses, the strikeouts, the whiffs, chasing. He's one of the best pitchers in the league at that. And he's been that way for a while. And I love that people who were concerned, oh, well, he had a 4.45 ERA and oh no, he walked. Well, yeah, because he's on the White Sox, first of all, just from a mental aspect, just not being on a nearly at all competitive team. And secondly, horrendous defense. And the Padres have a very good defense with guys like Machado, Tatis, Kim, and Jake Cronenworth too. So he's been everything we could expect. And we're going to see him in this Friday game. So I'm very, very excited to see that. And we're facing off against a fellow who, not going to lie,
it's okay.
I haven't been caught up in my D-back stuff.
It's okay.
But y'all got a man called Slade.
Mm-hmm.
Shout out to all my Teen Titans lovers out there. Slade Ciccone or Ciccone, 2.25 ERA across 2 starts, 3 strikeouts the first one, 8 strikeouts the second. Is this just some random fluke guy? Is it a prospect that actually had some? What's going on? I need the breakdown. Is he just this? Is he going to be the breakout star of the year that no one heard of? What's going on with my man Slade? I love it so much.
Yeah, D-backs might lead baseball in the best names. Slade and Blaze Alexander both starting against the Padres and going forward. Slade is someone that did have some pitching experience with the D-backs last season as like a late season call-up. Interesting pitching prospect, but he's really pitching right now because of course, all the injuries that the D-backs are dealing with. He's like a top 15-ish prospect. The D-backs like him. I don't think he has long-term future as a starter in the rotation, but he has been really good this season so far. I think the D-backs do want to keep him around potentially going forward this year as a long reliever. He's been really good at racking up the strikeouts this season. He throws in the mid-90s. He just played really clean, really good baseball so far. He's looked electric through 2 starts, like you mentioned, so far this season. And as long as he's pitching like this and has this hot hand, he has to stay in this rotation because he's really been one of the bright spots through, again, small sample size, but through 2 starts so far with the D-backs, he's looked really, really comfortable in that rotation. So going against this Padres team, which, yes, a couple of their stars are struggling a little bit, they're still, I looked at today, like 3rd in the National League in runs scored. So they can still put some runs on you. And like you said, going against a Dylan Cease who has been as good as you have wanted this year. Like you said, Dylan Cease, I think, is the perfect example of a star having a down season because of the situation they're in. You were able to rescue him from the Chicago White Sox, and now he is blossoming once again with good support around him. So I think it's a huge opportunity for Slade Ciccone to once again insert himself in, really make a case to stay on the major league roster because it's not going to be easy against Dylan Cease and that Padres lineup. And then for game number 2, like you mentioned, we potentially should see Michael King going against Brandon Pfaadt in that start. Michael King, like you mentioned, acquired from that Juan Soto deal. How are you feeling about the return from your Juan Soto deal? What can we expect from Michael King potentially in game number 2?
Well, I will say one quick thing about my man Slade. D-backs, y'all have been pretty good at pitchers who haven't faced the Padres before. Shout out to the no-hitter. You know what I'm saying? So I'm very nervous about that. But with Michael King, he is like Dr. Jekyll, Mr. and Hyde vibes where there are times, and if you look just, you're pulling up Baseball Savant, the swings and misses are up there. The changeup is electric sometimes. And then he's given up a bunch of home runs. He's 2nd in the league, I believe. I haven't checked in a little bit, but the last time he started, he's 2nd in the league to most home runs given up among qualified starting pitchers. That's been the problem with him. 5 ERA, 1.47 whip. And I don't think it's some fluky, weird, bloated ERA thing. I actually think that's actually low. Like seriously, like the hard contact he's given up this year has been really concerning. And while he is mostly a reliever, becoming a starting pitcher, it's still been really, really concerning. He's not, he's issuing a lot of free passes. He's been a disaster. The only good news is that he's not the number 1 starter on this team. In theory, he's the 4. But him pitching the way he's been pitching, unlike Joe Musgrove, who is Joe Musgrove and who is also had like a little bit of an injury that he was coming back from last year. And he actually had a really good start against the Reds the other day. Like, I have faith that he can be at least better than what he has been. Michael King, this just could be a miss and could be the reason that they might have to forcibly call up some of their pitching prospects, especially guys like Adam Mazur, who's been awesome in the minor leagues lately. He's been a hot stretch, and Robbie Snelling, the number 1 overall guy. Not to get too insider baseball with the Padres, but Michael King has been really, really rough. And I just look at Fott and I'm like 4.63 ERA, but 1.11 whip. He doesn't have nearly as many walks, only 6 on the year compared to King's 21. So this is the type of game that could be it's either going to be oh my gosh, like Michael King's going to get a lot of swing and misses. He might confuse some of the people who haven't been playing very well in the D-backs lineup, or this is a get right game for the D-backs. Seriously, like that's how concerned I've been with some of the meatballs that Michael King has thrown. He's giving Madison Bumgarner vibes, dare I say. You know what I mean? I know that's your boy. That's your boy, your guy. But yeah, this is definitely a poor pitching matchup, and I don't know if Fott's ERA tells the full picture.
Yeah, Fa is someone you look at his early season starts, really struggled against the teams like the Atlanta Braves, of course, who are really good. And he didn't have his best start against the St. Louis Cardinals either, gave up 6 earned runs earlier. But you look at his last 3 starts, pitching to at least the 6th inning in his last 3 starts, 2 earned runs or less in the last 3. And in his most recent start, career high 11 strikeouts. So Fott is someone that's starting to come into his own a little bit, starting to heat up, and he just looks way more comfortable. He's someone, when you go back to his rookie campaign, like a Michael King, giving up a lot of hard contact, giving up a lot of home runs, walking guys, just not a good rookie regular season. And then something flipped once he got to the postseason. He flipped the switch and he looked like a different guy once we got to the playoffs. And he just seemed like a guy that was kind of made for the postseason. He just seems so comfortable in those starts. And so for Fott, I think he took that confidence and has really parlayed it into the start of this regular season. So for the D-backs, I'm hoping it could potentially be a get-right game because their offense has been struggling in a big way this season. So maybe they could get it right against Michael King, but there's no promises there. But I know as a Padres fan, you've also seen some struggles from some of your stars in your lineup, and that's why I want to talk about Javi in segment number 3. I want to tell you guys about my favorite fantasy sports app right now, Prize Picks, because spring training is over and baseball season is officially underway. Don't miss your chance to add your favorite players from the Diamond in your Prize Picks entries. Whether it's strikeouts, RBIs, or first inning runs, take your pick of more or less and add them to your Prize Picks entries today. Get in on the playoff action and win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks as you and the world's best players take the game to a new level during basketball's postseason. You can take players like, I guess not LeBron James because he's not playing anymore, but you could take Jokic, guess the over-under on points, rebounds, and if you get it right, you can win some money. So if you want to win some money, just go download the app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, code LOCKEDONMLB, all lowercase, for a first deposit match up to $100. Prize Picks, pick more, pick less. It's that easy. All right. Back here on the Locked On Diamondbacks, Locked On Padres crossover. And Javi, let's talk about some struggling stars because both of our teams have some players who are not living up to expectations right now. I know me and you are in, a same fantasy draft or same fantasy league. And in the draft, I did take your guy, Fernando Tatis Jr., I believe, 2nd overall. Took some eye rolls there. I felt pretty good the first couple of weeks of the season. But following you on Twitter, I know Fernando Tatis Jr. hasn't been as hot recently. I also have a fantasy team, a different one, that has Machado, Tatis, and Bogarts, the big 3 for the Padres, and all 3 of them are kind of hurting me right now, Javi. So what's going on with the stars of the Padres before we talk about the stars of the D-backs struggling?
So here's the way I would view those 3. And I said this on a show of mine recently. I have the utmost confidence that Tatis will be fine. I really do. He's hit the ball already. Max exit velocity, which I do think matters in this case for a guy like him. He's already hit the ball 4 times harder than any ball he hit all of last year. I believe it's 4 or 5 times, about 113, something like that. And he's had some explosion games, the comeback game against the Cubs, all that stuff. Maybe he might not have like the best defensive year of all time or anything like that. Although that I still think isn't just going to vanish. He's going to be fine. Machado, I'm optimistic will be better. He's been swinging a lot better lately. Would have had a home run the other day if not for that catch by Stuart Fairchild that you might have even seen that went viral. It was a web gem.
Former D-back.
Yeah, former D-back. But Xander Bogaerts, man.
Oh,
That's the one where I'm like, I don't know. And look, I don't like to be Mr. like super stat guy, but for me, when your hard hit percentage goes down, and it was already pretty low the year before, he was in the 18th percentile hard hit rate last year. And then this year, Millard, he's in the 5th percentile. And don't get me wrong, Xander Bogaerts has never been necessarily a hard hit guy. That doesn't tell the full story. Go look up Luis Ariz, right? Like that guy never hits the ball hard, but he still manages to get hits. And Bogaerts can maybe hit you like 20 home runs, possibly, but he's a doubles guy and he gets singles, he draws walks. He's not doing anything. And that's why I think it's an issue. Last year, we said, oh, okay, the hard hit rate went down. He's nervous. It's his first year of a big contract, right? He changes from the American League to the National League. And most importantly, gets hit by a Spencer Strider fastball in that wrist area that has plagued him for years. That's been a thing that's hurt him. So it's like, okay, but with no, at least publicly, designated injury heading into this year for your hard hit rate to fall again, that's a red flag to me. Right. If it stayed the same as last year, that's one thing, which isn't great. But you're like, okay, last year he was still a 4.5 win player. His big thing was just he didn't hit with runners in scoring position. I've said too many times on my podcast that tends not to translate year to year in the regular season, right? But instead, this year he's not hitting anything. It's bad. They moved him down the lineup, and I know that you can relate with that.
yeah.
It's been a disaster. We're looking at Anthony Rendon. That's what we're looking at right now. We're looking at the new Hosmer type of person. Now, Hosmer, there was other reasons why he became so disliked in San Diego and I mean like several other reasons for that weren't having anything to do with his play. But it's bad, man. So like if you have Xander Bogaerts, I don't know what to do. The only thing you can hope is just that, like, first of all, he doesn't whiff at pitches, which is good. He's drawing a decent amount of walks. He's not striking out too much. You've just got to hope that he's been so bad, there's nowhere to go but up. But again, you go from 2021, 43% hard hit rate. It goes down a little bit, 39.5 in that contract year, then 34.6 and then 25.2. That's not what you want to see for a guy who just eclipsed 30. So I do think the statistics really matter in that regard. So that's how I feel, man. That's how I feel.
So how concerned are you? Like, what's the panic meter at this contract being like an all-time bust for you guys?
8. I'd say it's an 8. I'd say it's an 8 because the fact that we literally saw him, he was actually not that bad last year. Right. No. Like he wasn't. It was just runners in scoring position. Like I said, that doesn't usually translate year to year. This year, it's everything. And it's like, why? You should be healthy. Maybe that hit on the wrist last year, like screwed him. I don't know what it is. I don't know if the team is being stupid because the Padres aren't above being stupid when it comes to managing injuries, as they've shown, especially while I've been hosting this podcast for the past 5 years. Maybe he needs to go on the IL for a bit. But man, I mean, Millard, you're going to see some at-bats. Now, don't get me wrong. He's always had not a lackadaisical swing, but a swing that doesn't echo like, oh, man, this is Jordan. You know what I mean? He doesn't have that. But even still, there's a vibe to it. I'm talking dribblers up the middle. I'm talking infield fly balls galore. I think the only thing he's done at least okay is just not hit to too many double plays. I don't think I've seen him do that. But it doesn't matter because what he does is he pops up or he strikes out. Like, so it's been a nightmare. I'm optimistic that Machado will turn it around. I am utmost confident that Tatis will be fine. I think he's had a really weird stretch right now. He's been getting really unlucky. All the stats on him is great. But Bogaerts, man, I mean, I know you relate in some way where Corbin Carroll is in a little bit of a situation where his hard hit rate declined. And although, I'm not as worried about him because he's also young and hasn't been extended for 11 years and like 30 million a year. You know what I'm saying? So like Corbin Carroll, maybe this is just one of those like sophomore slumps type of seasons, but also he's not hitting the ball particularly hard in the 8th percentile. So a little bit better than Bogaerts, but not by much. So I imagine you can relate. Both of these teams have had a not insignificant amount of players that are underperforming.
Yeah, it's everything you said just now about Bogaerts, you could basically apply to Corbin Carroll. This could be a big weekend watching this series where I'm like, you know what? Maybe I just cut Bogaerts from my fantasy team. We'll decide that probably Monday morning. But everything you said about Bogaerts struggles, even from the injury, you could basically apply to Corbin Carroll, because there was a moment last year where Corbin Carroll, like the whole season, the first like 80 games, he's batting like 300. He's got like 18 home runs at the All-Star break. Then I think around June, July, he hurts his shoulder. He misses some time. And then if you look at like his sample size since he hurt his shoulder in the middle of the season last year, he's been a guy who has not been super effective at the plate. He was still good in the second half, but not showing the power that he showed in the first half of the season. And then this year, all the problems that you said with Bogaerts is the same issues that I have with Corbin Carroll. It's the dribblers. It's the infield pop-ups. He doesn't strike out a ton, just like a Bogaerts. When you look at the plate discipline, it's still not bad for Corbin Carroll. He still walked as much as he strikes out, and he doesn't strike out a ton. The K percentage is fine. The walk rate is fine. It just feels like when he swings at pitches, he's just not getting that quality contact. It feels like he's swinging at the right kind of pitches, but the contact for some reason is just not there. And I don't know what the problem is for Corbin Carroll. I don't know what the problem is for Bogaerts. Bogaerts, though, is still not someone that's not like super old. Yes, that contract is super long, but I think the silver lining for Bogaerts is still the fact that he's 31 years old. So you can still see him bounce back and still be good for at least the next 5 years. But the way that contract has started off, especially in year 2 of the deal, you don't like to see one of your players floundering like that. Now, this was only part 1 of the podcast between Javier Reyes and I. We're around our maximum allotted time. So I got a few more questions for you about some other players who are actually stepping up as we do part 2 of our little crossover, Locked On Diamondbacks, Locked On Padres.